Hello everybody, I'm Ulrich with your Fixed Auto, and today I'm going to be showing you how to do a simple tune-up. Now I've decided to do a simple tune-up on this because I've only got 150,000 miles. I will be showing you on a separate video how to do a complex tune-up on my 2000 GMC Sierra, since that car has over 260,000 miles on the clock, so I'll be doing a lot more complex tune-up on this one. Chances are you got a brand new car that you love and you're like, I want to take care of this car, and you're wondering how to do it, and a lot of people tell you, well, you should start with a tune-up, and you're probably wondering to yourself, what is a tune-up and how do I do it? And I'll show you exactly what it is. Now, a tune-up in my car consists of a brand new air filter. The car actually does not have a cabin air filter, otherwise you would include that in your tune-up. We also have new spark plug wires, we have new spark plugs, we have a new cap and rotor, and that's pretty much everything that you need for a simple tune-up. And on a side note, I actually did decide to go with OEM products for this tune-up. You usually cannot go wrong with OEM parts, especially when it comes to Toyota. So I went with a Denso air filter, NGK plugs and wires, and then the original OEM distributor cap and rotor. So let's get to it. And so to start off with the simplest task, we're just going to start with the air filter. To do that, you just have to pop 4 clips. And then the last one is hiding over here. And then you should be able to just lift and remove the air filter. This is the old air filter. It's actually not that bad from the top, but if you look at it from the bottom, you can see that it's actually very filthy, especially if you compare it to the new part over here. So you can see, old on the left, new on the right. And I don't even have to tell you which one's old and new, because this one's actually pretty apparent. So this is the one that we're gonna put in there. And it's also a good idea to look in there to make sure that you have no nests, no critters living in there. And mine is actually pretty clean. I vacuumed it not too long ago, so I'm just going to put the new air filter in there. But if you do find a lot of debris and dust in there, then it's a good idea to vacuum it out. Just make sure it goes in there and it fits. Pop the cover back on, and then pop the 4 clips back on. Give it a little wiggle and make sure it's secure. And the first item is done. Now the next item on the agenda is going to be the spark plugs and wires. Now when it comes to the wires, I would say label them so that way you know where they go, because you're just going to be doing a simple copy and paste. And if you get those mixed up, then the car won't even start. And that's one thing that we clearly want to avoid. But luckily on this car, they actually make it very simple. And as you can see on the new distributor cap, you can actually see that it's labeled 1, 2, 3, and 4, which starts on the left. That's 1, that's 2, that's 3, and that's 4. So that makes it actually pretty easy, so you don't have to label it. But if you don't have that on your new distributor cap, then I would recommend to label them. Grab some masking tape or some painter's tape, wrap it around there, mark it 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then in a position where you're going to be able to remember it on the distributor cap as well. And then the middle goes into the ignition coil pack, which you're going to find right over there. And if you wanted to, you can actually include that as part of your simple tune-up, but those tend to be a little bit on the pricier side. I've seen them north of $100, and then I've seen them as cheap as $50, $40. So you can include that in your simple tune-up, but I'm just not going to do it for this one. So we're just going to start by popping out all of the spark plug wires. And already here I can see that there is oil on there, so that's not a good sign. We're going to have to look down the spark plug well to make sure that there's no oil in there. And then we're going to take out trusty old 10mm, and then we're just going to unbolt the spark plug wire organizer over here. And then we can set these all aside for later. And luckily, while looking down the spark plug wells, they're actually completely dry. If you do run into a situation where it is full of oil, there's a possibility you might have to replace your valve cover gaskets. Those are actually very simple to replace. You just unbolt the valve cover and then just replace the gasket. There could be gaskets over here, and then you just put it back on and you should be good to go. But luckily, I don't have any of that. It's just a little oil that's around the seals. So I'm just gonna go through and wipe that down. See, look at that. We have just some oil gunk right over there. I'm just going to take a shop rag and go through and just make sure that it's nice and clean. Get that gunk out of there. See, look at what we're getting out. It's also a good idea to note just where the bolt locations are, and there is going to be 1 at the top and then 1 at the bottom. So it's a total of 2 in order to remove the distributor cap. So it's always good to inspect it beforehand. Now the next item on the agenda is actually to make sure that the spark plugs are gapped. When I ordered my spark plugs, they said they were already pre-gapped, and I don't always trust that. And so I actually went to my local auto parts store, and they said that the gap was 44 thousandths. And if I actually go into the owner's manual and go under specifications, I always trust the owner's manual more because, you know, they made the car. I actually ended up going to service specifications. This is actually where I ended up finding the part number for my spark plugs, as well as it tells you that the gap is actually 43 thousandths. So that's what we want to make sure that we gap it to. You're probably wondering, what does the gap mean? So the gap will actually tell you what the gap is in between right here. You can find this inexpensive part at your local auto parts store. I picked mine up for roughly about $2. And the way that it works is you want to start in the lowest setting, so the part that is actually the most thinnest, and as you can see, it actually gets thicker. So we're going to start at the part that's the most thinnest, and we're going to see roughly about where it stops. And if you actually check there, it actually stops at right about 38 thousandths. So it actually needs to be gapped just a little bit more in order to be correct. So even though these said that they were pre-gapped, it's always good to check. Now with this tool, most people actually think that this is a key ring, but the purpose of this is to actually help gap it. So you just insert it right there and then just have it so it pops just a little bit open. You want to check it just a little bit at a time, and it looks like we went just a little bit way over. And in order for you to close it back up, you just want to press it down against a hard surface and just keep checking your gap. I've seen people in the past use this in order to gap it. The only issue with that is it might break off the tip depending on what the tip is made out of. So you just want to be careful with that. I like to use this just to slightly open it and just keep on doing it until eventually it slides comfortably to where it's 0.043. So it's just 3 ticks in, the middle of it points to there, and we should be good to go. So this one's already gapped, and we're going to do the same thing to all 4 spark plugs. So after making sure everything is properly gapped, next we grab a specific spark plug socket. Now the difference between this and any other socket is that it has like a little rubber grommet in order to make sure that it holds on to the spark plug so it doesn't fall when you try to pick it back up. And some of them even have the magnetic part in the inside, so that way it grabs on to the metal part on the spark plug and makes it a lot easier to take out. So all you have to do is put that on an extension, get that in there, make sure that it's seated properly, just break all of them loose and pop them out. And that's one. I always like to check the condition of the spark plug head in order to tell you what the condition is of your engine. And I also like to check the gap to see what the engine was running under. And it looks like this one is at 41 thousandths, so it's not too bad. It's expected with time. And that makes 4. And normally I would put a little bit of anti-seize onto the threads, but NGK specifically tells you not to, so I'm just going to be putting this in dry. Usually I like to drop in the spark plugs by hand and threaded it by hand to avoid cross-threading. Just until it's tight by hand, then I can pop this out. And then if you have a torque wrench, it specifies between 13 and 18 pound-feet. So I'm going to do 15 pound-feet per spark plug. Since I am going to be working on the electrical system, it's always a good idea to remove the negative terminal from the battery so that way you don't get shocked while you work. And now moving back over to the distributor cap, all I got to do is take an 8mm socket and ratchet and remove the 2 bolts on the top and the bottom. I'm not going to lie to you guys, that bottom bolt was actually a huge pain to get out. It required a lot of just slowly turning it, seeing if I can get it by hand with a small ratchet and socket, but I finally was able to get it out. If you have an electric wrench, I would definitely recommend using that. That would just make life a lot more simple, but once you get both of the bolts out, you can just simply take out the cap, Pay attention that there is a gasket around there, and the new one does not come with a gasket, so you got to make sure that that goes on there. And then it exposes the rotor, and it looks like this is actually the original Denso rotor, and we're just going to be replacing it with the same rotor. And notice how the spark plug wires work on this. It looks like there's this little tab that you have to lift up, and then the wire will come off. I'm going to leave all the wires on here. I'm actually going to keep the old spark plug wires. It's always good to keep the old set in case one of the new ones end up failing. You could always put one of these ones in case of emergency. But since we're taking the whole assembly out, the only cable that we have to worry about removing is the one just on the ignition coil. So I showed you, you just have to lift up on that tab, and then this should all just come out. If you notice on the new cap, you can see there's actually two slots for screws. So I'm going to be using a stubby flathead screwdriver. You can even use a stubby Phillips head screwdriver in order to remove the rotor. So you just get it in there, and then feel for when it clicks, and then you should be able to remove it. Then you do the same thing for the other side. It's also a good idea to pay attention to how this is laid out, so that way you can put it back, put the new one on exactly how the old one was placed. So we'll just get the new one, place it in just like this, and get it on there. And for those that are curious, this is actually what the bolt that was holding in the distributor rotor on. This is what it looks like. So both a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver would work. There is actually a tab on the distributor rotor that fits into this slot towards the bottom that has a very similar shape. And then if you put it in there, then the two screw holes should align. Should slip on just like that. And then you could just get the two screws in. Then you get the screws in, and then you get them until they're just snug. Make sure not to over tighten these. Next, it's time to put the distributor cap back on. I got out the electric wrench in order to make this job actually a little bit simpler. If you do not have one, you just have to put it in by hand. And it'll go in just as I took it out, with the 2 and the 4 facing up, and with the name Denso facing up as well. So make sure the gasket that's on there is seated well, and then align the screw holes, and then get the bolts in. It does not need to be super tight, it just needs to be nice and snug. The last thing to do is just to get the spark plug wires on there, get them all organized, put the little wire organizers on there, and then we're good to go. I took out the spark plug wires. They are blue, so they're going to make the engine pop just a little bit, but look how beautiful this is. These guys are labeled 1 to 4 to make installation just a lot simpler. You just have to match up the numbers to this, to the distributor cap, and then just place them in the correct order. Like I said, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we should be good to go. So let's just pop those in. And if you wanted to, it's always a good idea in order to put some dielectric grease onto the spark plug boot in order to prevent the boot from seizing up against the spark plug. Just get some, put it on the inside of the boot. And you can't forget to hook up the ignition coil cable, the one that's smack dab in the middle. Yeah, make sure that you put your... And you got to make sure you put your cable organizer so that way it looks nice and neat, and then make sure you don't forget to put down that 10mm bolt back in order to secure it all down. But after that comes the fun part. You get to turn it on and see what it sounds like. Beautiful. And that, my friends, is how you do a simple tune-up. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you like the video, then please give it a thumbs up. A subscribe and share goes a long way. If anything, it'll put a smile on my face, and it'll motivate me in order to come out with more videos. So please like, subscribe, and share. And thank you guys so much for watching.